Slashaholics. This is David Bergantino, author of the book Wes Craven's New Nightmare, the Bard's Blood Horror Shakespeare series, and the writer-designer of the upcoming horror video game Return, One Way Trip. You're listening to the 80s slasher librarian's narration of my books in the Freddy Krueger's Tales of Terror series. Prepare to be scared.
Before I get started tonight, I just want to wish a speedy recovery to the author of this book. David, we're thinking about you, and I hope you get better soon. Freddy Krueger's Tales of Terror, Deadly Disguise. Chapter 4. "Oh no," Jack muttered. Then to Ron he barked, "Come on!" The two men ran toward the ballroom entrance. Rachel followed as quickly as she could. In the outer entrance, the fallen giant sat on the floor against a wall, his knees drawn to his chest. His breath came in pained gasps. "You okay, Larry?" Jack asked, kneeling down beside him as Ron kept running. "Just dandy," he groaned. Jack frowned and rose. He barely spared Rachel a glance as he sped down the hall. The enormous man, each arm the diameter of Rachel's waist, began to stretch out his legs. That's when she noticed the word written on his blue t-shirt, security. Seeing that, Rachel ran to join Jack and Ron. Around the corner, the girl in the hoop dress sat awkwardly in a chair. Her arms and legs were crossed insolently. She seemed to be ignoring Jack, who was speaking to her angrily. Ron stood by, ready to mediate. The second giant, also part of security, stood nearby, waiting for trouble. "Answer me!" Jack yelled at the girl in the chair. "What's going on?" Rachel asked, gently touching Jack's shoulder to get his attention. At the sound of her voice, the girl in the chair leapt to her feet. The security giant flinched, but stopped short of tackling the girl when she remained where she stood. The girl gave him a withering look, then turned back to Rachel. "And who are you?" she asked with a wicked smile. "I'm Rachel," she answered hesitantly, glancing at Jack. "Vanessa?" Jack warned the girl. "Oh, yes, Jack," the girl gushed. "Please, introduce us." Without giving him the opportunity, she stepped forward and held out her hand. "Oh, I'll do it. I'm Vanessa Shamara. Happy to meet you." Rachel shook hands with Vanessa reluctantly. Obviously, Jack knew who she was and didn't like her. Her manner was so forceful it threw Rachel off balance. Only Ron seemed unshaken by her. "You're not supposed to be here, Vanessa." Jack's voice was filled with pent-up rage. Vanessa just laughed it off, then she fixed him with a steely gaze. "Well, I am here, Jack," she purred, "so get me some punch." To Rachel she flashed a bright and utterly fake smile. "Let's chat later, all right?" After flashing a self-satisfied look at Jack and Ron, Vanessa sauntered toward the ballroom. The security behemoth started forward, but Jack held up a hand to stop him. "Come on, Ron," Jack told him tiredly. Ron's eyes twinkled with further amusement. "I better get her some punch," Ron said, addressing Rachel. "If I don't, she may just kill me," he said, mocking the way Vanessa spoke. The remark didn't sit well with Jack, who simply scowled. "Who is she?" Rachel asked. Ron deferred the answer to Jack. "Oh, God, an ex from hell," he sighed. "I'll tell you about it later, I promise. Will you excuse me for now, though?" Rachel didn't see that she had a choice. "Of course." "Thanks," he said, brightening momentarily. Then his face darkened again. "Let's go grab the tiger by the tail," he said to Ron, and they started off. As he passed, Ron gave Rachel a sly wink. Jack found Vanessa at the punch table where she was flirting with a geeky, nervous caterer who had served her some punch. The geek looked familiar to Jack, but he couldn't quite place him. At the moment he had more pressing matters on his mind, like how and why Vanessa Chimera had ended up in Springwood. As he and Ron approached, Vanessa took time out from her flirting to greet them. "You weren't quick enough," she scolded. "So this nice boy helped me." The caterer failed to realize how condescending Vanessa was being toward him. Instead, he seemed awestruck by her presence, and Vanessa's reference to him gave him an exciting opportunity to introduce himself to his host. "Hi, I'm Peter," he said, introducing himself. "Very glad to meet you." "Hi," Jack said simply, hardly paying attention. "Wow," Peter gushed. "Meeting two big stars? I mean, obviously, since this is your house, you might be here, you know. But Vanessa Chimera, too?" Ron cleared his throat. "I've done some television work as well," he interjected stiffly. "Whoa, cool!" Peter said, suddenly uncomfortable. He recovered with, "But Vanessa Chimera? Man, look at her!" Vanessa was eating up the adoration. "Meeting her is a bigger bonus than the sneaker phone that comes with the magazine subscription. Totally." "This guy's running at the mouth," Jack thought to himself. People like that really got to Jack, and Vanessa knew it. She had a knack for picking those people out, and the habit of throwing them at Jack. Well, he wasn't going to let her get to him tonight. It was his night, and he wouldn't let her ruin it. "Well, after you're off work, I hope you'll stay," Jack told him, parrying Vanessa's thrust. She smiled, knowing the game was on, and that her pawn would make the next move for her. "Listen, Jack," Peter paused a second, panic in his eyes. "I hope I can call you that." Jack nodded. Peter relaxed and pulled over an olive-skinned female co-worker. "Repeat!" the co-worker screeched as she spilled the punch she had been serving to someone. Repeat. The name struck a chord somewhere in Jack's brain. It was a sinister, minor chord, but he couldn't identify it. Maybe later, he thought. When I have some room to think, it'll come to me. Peter pushed the girl toward Jack. She resisted, very bashful. "This is Maria," Peter said. "She's a huge, huge fan, but she's too shy to introduce herself." Jack looked at the girl, who was standing too close for comfort. She was pretty, Jack thought, and she had a Major Jones for him, he could tell. Another occupational hazard, meeting people who developed crushes on you. Or at least on who they thought you were, Jack corrected himself. Another reason he had kept out of the limelight since the fire. Too many demands by people with the wrong ideas. "Hi," said Maria, her face flushing deeply. Jack saw out of the corner of his eye that Vanessa was studying him. She expected him to break now. She would be disappointed. "I'm glad you're here," Jack told Maria, with all the sincerity he could muster. At least Maria was pretty. Not my type, he thought, but a looker even so. "You'll stay later, too, won't you?" Maria looked like she had just been asked to sit at the round table. "I'd be honored," she said, wide-eyed. "Why, thank you." Her behavior unsettled Jack a bit. People who formed attachments as quickly as Maria made him nervous. If unrealistic expectations weren't met, things could turn very sour quickly. That had occurred once already with the obsessed fan in L.A. Several times she had managed to enter his house. One time he had arrived home to find her cooking dinner for him. Despite the psychiatric evaluations and the restraining orders, the woman kept returning. He needed her, she claimed. Jack had tried to be understanding through the whole ordeal, but finally, when he came home to find her soaking in a luxurious bubble bath, his frustration got the best of him. His words to her that time were relentlessly cruel. Finally, she took his rejection to heart, calling him a horrible person. In between expletives. That was the good news. The bad news was that his house was burned to the ground less than a month later. The fan's involvement was never proved, but Jack knew in his heart that she was responsible. The loss of his house, on the heels of so much else, almost caused him to crack up. But with the help of his friends, primarily Ron, he had come through that episode in one piece. It was Ron who had suggested using the fire as an excuse to lie low, regroup, then emerged more powerful than ever. "You'll be the phoenix rising," Ron had told him. Now here he was in his hometown, dealing with infatuated fans once again. "Hey, can I get a picture with you?" Repeat asked, holding up a camera. I don't want to impose. I know it's your party and all. But man, when am I going to get this chance again, you know?" Jack was about to refuse. Then he saw Vanessa's face. She knew he had reached his limit and was waiting for a chance to gloat. Smiling, he pulled Vanessa swiftly to his side. "Might as well get one with all of us," he said. Vanessa was about to protest, then saw that she would be the loser if she did. Historically, Vanessa hated photo ops even more than Jack. Her plan had backfired, and they both knew it. "Ron, why don't you get in here too?" Then, with evil glee, he told Repeat, "Tell you what, bud, you stand between me and Vanessa with your arms around us both." Repeat looked thrilled. Vanessa trumped, scowled at Jack. Would you take the picture?" Repeat asked Maria. "Sure," she said softly. As the others got into position, she pointed the camera. She counted off. 1, 2, 3. Everyone smiled, and they held their breath. But instead of taking the picture, Maria lowered the camera. "Isn't it advanced?" Repeat asked. "Oh, no, it's fine," Maria said. "I was just wondering if, I could get a picture with me next." She looked at Jack with hungry eyes. Ridding the wave of his victory over Vanessa's attempt to embarrass him, Jack agreed instantly. Maria gave a grateful smile and lifted the camera once more. 1, 2, 3. This time her finger pressed down, and the camera gave a satisfying click. "Here, I'll take your picture," Repeat said quickly. Vanessa turned quickly away. "I want to go dance now," she said. She was declaring an end to the contest of wills. "Well, I want you to leave," Jack said, mimicking her. "I didn't invite you here." Vanessa turned on him instantly. "You didn't even have the decency to tell me where you were," she snarled. "No one walks out on me." "Well, you better get used to it, Vanessa," replied Jack, taking a step toward her. Vanessa stood her ground, defiant. "With your cuddly personality, I see a whole slew of people walking out on you. If they're stupid enough to let you get that close in the first place." As the argument gathered momentum, Maria and Repeat watched, completely forgotten. "You was stupid enough," Vanessa spat back. "Yes, but I wised up. We broke up weeks ago. Get it through your skull and get out of here." "Are you going to kick me out?" She was in his face, seriously challenging him this time. "Not your hired goons, but you? If you have the guts to throw me out of here personally, I'll go." Jack locked eyes with Vanessa, trembling with rage. He grabbed her by the wrists, tightly. He was on the verge of yanking her off her feet and dragging her to the nearest exit. Then he'd be rid of her. Vanessa, trying not to wince at the pain, looked down, then slowly she raised her head, seething with fury. In a low voice she spoke slowly, enunciating with precision. "I will scream so loud." They locked gazes again. Then the moment of danger passed and Jack released her. He had come so close. Looking hard at his watch, he said to Ron, "I have to get the haunted mansion going." With a disgusted look at Vanessa, he added, "Deal with her, please. I just can't." Spinning on his heels, he walked away. Repeat and Maria, back to serving punch, watched Jack plunge into the crowd. Maria appeared shell-shocked by the scene they had witnessed. "Guess all the action's over, huh?" Repeat asked with a chummy, nasty smile. "Actors, Hollywood," he said the word with great distaste. "They're all trash. especially Jack Spyder." "I thought you were a fan," Maria said, confused. Repeat laughed and dropped all pretenses. "Not of anyone in that sorry group. I'll tell you something. I know Jack Spyder, or rather, knew him whenever he was John Appleby, and he didn't even recognize me. Huh." He rubbed his hands together in evil glee. "Is he ever in for it?" "What on earth are you talking about?" Repeat looked around. Ron and Vanessa stood a few yards from the table in stony silence. Pulling Maria near to him, Repeat whispered into her ear, "You know how the Applebys still own a lot of the real estate around here, right?" Maria nodded. "Now it's all Jack's, although I'm sure he's removed from the day-to-day stuff, but years ago his father ran it all himself. He was like one of those robber barons of old, Raymond Appleby. My father used to work for him. He was his right-hand man. But there was only room for one at the top, so my father left to find his own fortunes, and believe it or not, he did. My father turned land Appleby considered worthless into lucrative property." Repeat was no longer into the party. As he gazed ahead, he saw only the past, his father and his fledgling real estate empire. A look of wonder stole over his face, then his eyes narrowed with bitterness. "Appleby saw my father as a threat to his local monopoly. He initiated several partnerships with my father's firm, a Trojan horse. When the time was right, Appleby took over my father's company, kicked him to the streets. We lost everything." The spell broke and Repeat returned. His eyes blazed with mad energy. "After that, my father proceeded to drink himself to death. At his funeral, I promised I would find some way to get back at Appleby for what he did. When he died in California in that damn car accident, I was bummed. There went my chance for revenge." "That's a horrible thing to say," Maria told him, horrified. "You don't mean it." "I mean that so absolutely you could look it up in a dictionary," he declared. "But now little John Appleby has come home, and I've got a skeleton full of bones to pick with him." "Whatever Mr. Appleby did isn't Jack's fault." "Sins of the father, Maria. Sins of the father." Repeat knew he was scaring Maria. He didn't care. "What are you going to do, Repeat?" Repeat just smiled. Chapter 5. Jack turned on the wireless microphone he wore on his lapel. As he ascended the stairs, the music faded out. "It's almost midnight, folks," he announced when he had reached the top and gotten the crowd's attention once more. "The witching hour, the moment when the dark forces of the universe are at their strongest. And tonight," he intoned dramatically, "Halloween night, death actually walks among us." In the crowd, people were exchanging glances. Half of the crowd was amused by Jack's speech. The rest seemed genuinely spooked. Perfect, Jack thought. In fact, death has taken up residence in this very mansion. He pointed up the stairs behind him. He's remodeled a few of the rooms. They have become Death's guest quarters. Jack punctuated his speech with a sinister laugh. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll walk up these stairs, you'll discover the joy and the horror of the Haunted Mansion." The landing at the top of the right staircase lit up. Immediately, a thick carpet of fog rolled down the stairs. The effect was eerie and impressive. The crowd needed no further encouragement. The revelers swarmed up the stairway, eager to see what surprises their wealthy and inventive host had in store for them. As the first guest approached the foggy doorway, Jack pushed his way down the stairs and found Rachel. "Wow, what do you have up there?" Jack just smiled. "Oh, you'll find out soon enough." He glanced up the stairs expectantly. Moments later, he heard what he was waiting for. Screams floating down from the floor above. At the refreshment table, Vanessa stood beside Ron, scowling. "Look at them, excited over a fun house," she sneered. "Toto, you little mongrel, we are back in Kansas." "Why so grumpy, Vanessa?" Ron asked her. "Things are going great. Your entrance couldn't have been more perfect." "I suppose," Vanessa replied skeptically as she smoothed her dress with her hands. "Those goons were a little rougher than I expected. I thought you were going to take care of them. They might really have hurt me, you know." "Oh, I didn't tell you?" Ron said, smiling wickedly. "I decided not to clue them in. I didn't want to risk their giving us away with poor acting." "You would know about poor acting," Vanessa countered. Then, without warning, she struck him a blow to the shoulder. "That's for letting me nearly get hurt." "Ow!" Ron said, rubbing his eyes. But the smile never left his face. If anything, it only took on a harsher edge. "Don't be a princess. It worked beautifully. Jack's having a horrible time." Vanessa laughed with evil glee. "Yes, he is," she declared. "Did you see when I dared him to drag me out of here?" Ron nodded and smiled. "I was certain he was going to lose it. It was in his eyes." "You should have seen your eyes, my dear. You were scared." The observation flustered Vanessa slightly. "Well, my dear, I do believe there was murder in Jack's eyes." Ron laughed. "Perfect." "Yes, perfect," Vanessa agreed. Jack Spyder was on the edge, and she had almost pushed him over. It wouldn't take much longer to finish the job. Then everything that was his would be hers. And Ron's, she thought dryly, for a little while. "Just as well Jack didn't crack right then and there," Ron told her. "The game would have been over before it began." "Before it began, my sweet. It all began when you burned down his house in Beverly Hills." Ron nodded in agreement. "Yeah, but I mean this round of the game. You only just got here. Would you want him breaking down in your first 5 minutes? I've taken you for more of a sportswoman than that." "Yes, I suppose you're right," answered Vanessa, considering the spirit of the matter. "I did come all this way." She shook her head sadly. "Poor Jack. What did he ever do to deserve what we're doing to him?" Ron appeared to concentrate very seriously for a moment. Then he just threw up his hands. "Not a darn thing," he answered, as if surprised to have come to that conclusion. "Maybe we should call this off." With a look of serious concern, he locked eyes with Vanessa. They almost seemed to share the worry that they were doing the wrong thing, but then Ron's lips began to tremble. Suddenly they both burst into gales of laughter. "Sorry," Ron said when he could finally speak again. Vanessa was wiping tears from her eyes. "I couldn't keep a straight face any longer. Can you imagine developing a conscience at this late date?" "I think not," Vanessa giggled. Then she searched the crowd. "Where is Jack?" Ron picked him out easily. "At the bottom of the stairs," he said, pointing. "With Rachel." "Oh, yes, that girl has Old Flame written all over her." "But," An idea sprang to mind. We'll have to find some way to work her into our plan. Set them against one another, like they do on that show.
We may not need to go that far, Ron reminded her, but we'll see. Why don't you go up to your room and change out of that costume?
I might as well, she said, yawning suddenly. I hate wearing period clothes unless I'm getting paid. At minimum scale.
At this, the evil smile blazed from Ron's face. When this little melodrama is over, honey, we'll both have made a lot more than scale. Vanessa's pupils practically turned into dollar signs.
Yes, we will, she gushed.
Then, with a quick look at the staircase, she found Jack and Rachel again. Their backs were to the refreshment table. Seeing it was safe, she threw her arms around Ron and gave him a long kiss.
Thanks, he said softly. It has been a while, Vanessa purred. You've been back and forth between L.A. and this God-forsaken place forever, it seems.
All for the greater good, Ron assured her. He then gave her a quick peck on the cheek. Get going, and I'll cut the power in a little while when Jack's in the middle of his haunted mansion. We'll end this little soiree. I'll be up shortly thereafter so we can coordinate tomorrow's festivities.
Don't keep me waiting too long. You know how I hate that.
With one last quick kiss, she always had to have the last word and the last kiss, Vanessa turned and walked away. Ron watched her disappear into the crowd. Smiling to himself, he sauntered away. It was almost time to lower the boom on this little shindig. He was so focused on the task before him that he didn't hear the quiet click behind him. As most of the crowd shuffled forward and up the staircase, two figures furtively edged themselves away. No one noticed them. It was exactly as they had planned.
As far as I can tell, Todd Winkle told his partner, we've got roughly an hour to loot the West Wing.
Van McBride smiled greedily.
Just like Shop Till You Drop on TV.
You watch shows like that? Todd asked in disbelief. You wuss.
Shut up, Van whined defensively. Let's just get going, okay?
Fine, wuss. Todd couldn't help adding. You got upstairs, I got down here. Meet you out by the car. Van gave him a thumbs up. And Van?
Yeah?
No screwing around, okay?
Shut up, Van snapped, wounded by Todd's lack of faith. I never screw around.
As Todd started down the long corridor, a floor below the festivities and on the opposite side of the house, he thought how easy this was going to be. Easiest take yet in their burglary career. That chump Jack had practically asked them to relieve him of a portion of his valuables. He'd even gone to the trouble of sending them party invitations. Now that, Todd thought, was asking for it. Not long ago they had been prodigies of Scrag Morton, acting as his advance team, his lookout, his accomplices, his alibi, and more. Scrag had taught them everything. Then, of course, Scrag's brain had ended up on the business end of his own jumper cables. For several months after Scrag's death, Todd and Van had laid low. Convinced their leader had been killed in revenge for some past crime, they felt certain they would be next. But no one came after them, and once they realized no one was going to come after them, they decided to go into business for themselves. Naturally, Todd ascended to Scrag's position of leadership. Van was too dim-witted for almost everything but taking strict orders and performing explicit tasks. At this he excelled, but he had one other talent, a gift, really, that served him well. Van was a human divining rod, always able to find the most valuable items in a home, no matter how well their owners hid them. Todd continued down the corridor, carefully opening each door he came to. As he expected, most of the rooms were empty. Some contained only a few pieces of furniture, sheet cover to protect them from dust while the house remained unoccupied. The sheets were white, giving the impression that this was not really furniture at all, but the ghost of furnishings past. The stale air combined with the eerie decor to send a chill through him. Before long, Todd could no longer hear any sounds from the ballroom. He felt as if he was on another planet. A creepy feeling shivered up his spine. Then he came to the room that made him smile. A bedroom filled with boxes, each box bearing a Los Angeles return address. "Bingo," he said out loud. Todd knew he had hit the jackpot. "I'm gonna know soon," he said, and the dead air of the room absorbed his voice like a thirsty sponge. He took a flashlight out of his pocket. Turning lights on was a no-no. He had figured out long ago. Pointing the beam of the maglite over the pile of boxes, Todd approached, ready to help himself to whatever he liked. Rachel and Jack stood before the curtain of fog that led to the so-called haunted mansion beyond. Since the first group had crossed the threshold, the screaming had not stopped. Now, ready to plunge into the dangerous unknown herself, Rachel could hear other sounds. The growls of feral beasts, the moans of the dead, the shriek of bats, all before a faint background of Elvis Presley music. "Are you ready?" Jack asked excitedly. His enthusiasm was contagious. Rachel felt like she was about to leave the thrill of her life. "Let's go," she said, and together they forged ahead into the haunted mansion. Darkness engulfed them. When Rachel's eyes adjusted, she found herself in an alcove. It had been painted black, and a glowing arrow pointed left to a door. "You do the honors," Jack offered. He was watching her expectantly. Obviously, Rachel thought, he knows what lies ahead and wants to see how I react. Bracing herself for whatever horror lay beyond, Rachel reached for the doorknob. But as soon as she touched it, a shrieking black cloud descended upon them. Bats, with their demonic faces and needle teeth, swarmed all around. Rachel panicked, screaming and struggling with the door that refused to open. Swatting at the creatures, she turned to Jack for help. He was laughing. That's when she realized the bats were mechanical. "Of course, you dolt," she thought, like there would be real bats living in an alcove of an occupied building. But the scare had been exhilarating. As if cued by her awareness, the cloud of bats rose and disappeared into the ceiling. On its own, the door now clicked open. She looked at Jack for some indication of what to do next. Still smiling, Jack simply held out a hand. Carefully, Rachel walked through the doorway. The door closed abruptly behind them, shutting out all light and blinding them again. She knew they were in a room, and she could feel that someone else or something else was in there with them. Like an incoming tide, the sounds of a crowd began to fill the air. A bright light burst from the ceiling, illuminating a guillotine on the far wall of the medium-sized room. A robotic executioner, steely eyes peering from his black mask, looked down at his feet. Below, a victim struggled, his head trapped in the yoke of the guillotine. The executioner pulled a rope and the blade dropped. The sound of a man screaming, then a gurgling sound. The victim's head fell from the yoke and into a basket. A flood of blood pouring from the remaining stump of a neck. Rachel's screams blended with those of the imaginary crowd as she buried her face into Jack's chest. Instinctively, he encircled her with his arms. "It's over now. It's okay." He was trying to be soothing, but the amusement in his voice was unmistakable. "Come on, let's go." "This must have cost you a fortune," Rachel choked out. Looking up, she saw the light fading from the scene, until the room was black once more. "It did," Jack replied proudly. "But I can tell you it was worth it. I had the whole east wing reconfigured into a sort of a maze, and these scenes put in." "What about after Halloween is over?" Rachel wondered. "You've gone to a lot of trouble for just one day." Jack nodded lazily. "I don't know. Maybe I'll have tours. I'll figure something out."
A light came up, pointing them in the direction of another door. Jack led the way this time. They didn't even make it to the door. A hideous, huge man sprang from the shadows. Rachel jumped back as the man's arms shot out, thrusting an object at them. She screamed when she saw what it was: a severed head. Chapter 6. The hoop skirt lay on the floor like a pile of shed lizard skin. Vanessa pulled on jeans and a fuzzy sweater. Her hair, which had been braided and piled on top of her head, now hung in silky strands around her neck. Slowly, methodically, Vanessa brushed her hair for maximum gloss, all the while staring blankly into a mirror. But her mind was not blank. It was registering how familiar the Appleby mansion felt, even though she had never been here before. She remembered a recent and recurring dream. In it, a tiny fairy promised her enormous riches if Vanessa could follow her. The fairy, a glowing ball of light, flitted all about, up and down, sometimes darting forward, then back, then retracting its path, and Vanessa followed. Their surroundings were pitch black and featureless save for invisible walls. Vanessa was certain that it was through the halls of this mansion that she had chased the fairy in her dream. No matter how high, how fast, or how erratically the fairy had moved, Vanessa had been able to keep up. For the prospect of unlimited wealth, as the fairy had promised, she could will herself to sprout wings and fly. The nature of the fairy treasure had been revealed for a short moment to Vanessa, but was lost when she abruptly woke up. Whatever the treasure was, it had been wondrous, and though the knowledge vanished once her eyes opened, the feeling of amazement at her own good fortune remained. Now in this mansion the answer would be revealed to her once again, but this time she would hold on to it, and it would not vanish. Screams wafted up from the floor below. Vanessa shivered. She wished all those guests would go away so that tomorrow would come. Tomorrow, she mused. Our plan begins. Emphasis on our plan, she pointed out to herself. After that, my plan kicks into gear. It was sad, Vanessa thought, because once she had truly loved Jack. But for the moment, Ron was the man with the plan, and Jack was the host who'd be toast. If only Jack hadn't started ignoring her after his parents had died. They had been happy before then. He had been generous with his affection and his money, especially his money. Then his parents had perished in some anonymous traffic accident, and Jack had turned inward. For the first few days, Vanessa had been all sensitivity, allowing him his grief, but after that she became bored. When he finally claimed to have gained some sort of perspective on things so that he could cope, he was a changed person. He ceased being fun. The money and the affection stopped flowing. Jack attempted to break up with her, claiming that they weren't right for one another. As if guys broke up with Vanessa Chimera. Ha! Back in the ballroom, the caterers were preparing to leave. Repeat dropped 2 trays during the cleanup process. His co-workers thought he was just jittery from too much caffeine, combined with his natural edginess. Only Maria noticed the smile on Repeat's face. "What's your problem?" Maria finally asked. "Is your stupid idea of taking out all your frustrations on Jack making you nervous?" "You've got a huge crush on that imbecile, don't you?" Repeat charged. "You better not tell him any part of what I told you before." "I don't care to get involved," Maria said evenly, though in fact she had been keeping an eye on Repeat all evening. "I found something, okay?" Repeat whispered. "If I tell you, can you keep a secret? I mean a jumbo, elephant-sized blue whale looks like a guppy in comparison. Secret?" Maria immediately turned away. "I don't think I should hear it," she said nervously. Repeat laughed at her mousiness. He was certain she wouldn't turn him in. He had dreamed of her lately, and in the dreams he could talk a million miles an hour, and she would listen patiently.
No matter what he said, she never judged or commented unfavorably, so he had a good feeling now about telling her what he had overheard. Even if what he revealed shocked her, she wouldn't blow his cover. "Come on," Repeat cajoled Maria. "If I don't spill my guts, I'll explode, and they'll be splattered all over the room anyway." "Ah, it's Halloween, Maria. I'm allowed to be gross." He was on a roll now. Things were working out much better than he had dreamed possible. Just listen to this. Out of his pocket, Repeat produced a micro-cassette recorder he had been carrying all night. He was on his second tape now, the one with the juicy information. Pressing play, he held the tiny speaker up to Maria's ear. At first she seemed annoyed at him. Then she realized whose voices she was hearing, and what they were saying. At the end, her mouth dropped open. "That can't be," she said. Repeat smiled like a cat who had just consumed the entire aviary. "That's what Ron and Vanessa was muttering about Jack after he left. You saw them kiss, so you know they weren't play-acting." "We have to find Jack," she said, her voice rising in panic. "Find him and warn him right away." She turned abruptly and started toward the stairs. Repeat reached out quickly to stop her. No, Repeat scolded. "We can't do that." "He'll believe us," she insisted. "You have the tape." "Of course I do," Repeat said, though inside he felt very jumpy. Maybe he had made a mistake telling Maria. Time for some major damage control. "Don't you wonder why I have this tape recorder in the first place?" Maria stopped trying to pull away and looked down at the device in Repeat's hand. She regarded it warily, as if he held a live grenade. "Does it have to do with your vendetta?" "Correcto mundo, my dear," Repeat exclaimed. He pulled her close again. "The National Enquirer has hired me to give them the inside scoop on this here party. They're paying me $5,000. "Doesn't seem like much, does it?" Repeat allowed. "But a few pictures here, an out-of-context statement there, it starts to add up. Mix in a generous dose of creative interpretation, and I've got a whiz-bang story that's going to knock old Jack here on his keister for good. Hollywood will never look at him again. And think how the local gentry will react to reports that, I don't know, an orgy took place here this evening, when the kids insisted it would be all good, clean fun." "He'd have nowhere to go," Maria realized. "He certainly couldn't settle here in Springwood if that happened, not comfortably." "You've got the picture," Repeat said cheerfully. "And now with this real dirt, I can probably double my asking price, see?" He looked off into space again, the possibilities swimming before his eyes. Then it hit him. "Better yet, I'll sit on it. Wait till the whole thing comes down, then write a book about it. With my evidence, I'll be able to sell it for tons of money." Maria was speechless with shock, but Repeat didn't notice. He had come up with the perfect revenge. Jack would be destroyed, mentally as well as professionally, and he, Pete Peters, would profit from every bit of it. "You can't do that," Maria said, her voice taking on a surprisingly threatening tone. "I can't let you. I won't let you." Repeat was so surprised by her protest, he nearly believed her for a moment. Then he remembered who he was dealing with, the ineffectual drama queen of Springwood High. "Maria," he said almost casually, "you have to realize that there's nothing you can do now to prevent it. Who would believe you? And who really cares about Jack Spyder anyway, am I right? These kids?" he said, gesturing to the dwindling crowd. "They don't care. They're just trying to get a freebie. Jack himself probably wouldn't let you get anywhere near him. He got Ron to protect him from the riffraff." He then delivered the coup de grace. "Telling Ron or Miss Vanessa Snoot-Nose would be a very bad idea for both of us, don't you think? You don't want them to know that you know their dirty little secret. If they're not afraid to ruin a big, visible star like Jack Spyder, what do you think they do to little country bumpkin nobodies like us? His argument seemed to be working. Maria stared at him, her eyes huge as the enormity of what he was suggesting soaked in. Maria seemed to agree that she was trapped by circumstance. She nodded slowly. "Okay," she said, almost shell-shocked. "I won't say anything." But Repeat wasn't convinced. "You gotta promise me, girl." He drew Maria's gaze into his own. "If you promise me you won't say anything, I'll believe you. Then I won't have to be worried." By the look on Maria's face, Repeat didn't have to worry, but he just wanted to seal the deal anyway. Maria hesitated a moment, then her shoulders sagged. "Okay, I promise." To show he was a good sport, Repeat gave her a quick kiss on the forehead. "Don't worry, hon, it'll be all right. I'll even cut you in when the big bucks start raining down like ashes from Mount St. Helens." The offer failed to cheer Maria. Just as well, Repeat thought. I ain't sharing with no one nohow. "Looks like we're done," he said, surveying the area that neither of them had helped finish clearing. "You staying or going?" "I'd better go home," Maria sighed. "I couldn't stay here under the circumstances." "Good girl," Repeat told her. "Best not tempt yourself to cause trouble by hanging around. I'm going to head out to my car, then come back and see how the rest of this evening shakes out. See what shaking I can do myself," he added with an evil wink. Maria just shook her head sadly and walked away. A door creaked open in the west wing of the mansion. As soon as Todd shined in his flashlight, he knew he had struck pay dirt. The cone of light before him revealed a formal study. The smell of leather and wood was strong here. This was clearly a room left over from the days when the Appleby family had occupied the mansion. Under one large sheet stood a huge mahogany desk. No doubt old man Appleby had sat behind it, looking at a map of Springwood like he was the only king working a checkerboard. Slicing up the darkness with the flashlight, Todd found paintings, ceiling-high shelves of books, and most strikingly, an enormous stuffed polar bear he guessed must have been 12 feet tall. As he stared into the bear's snarling face, the door behind him creaked once more, then clicked softly closed. Todd spun quickly, his flashlight extended like a sword, but no one was there. He tried to hold himself together. After all, old houses played little tricks like that. At least that's what everyone said. Todd took a second look at the paintings. There was sure to be a safe hiding behind one of them. All the old libraries and studies had them. And who was to say the Applebys didn't leave a few thousand stashed away here? Maybe nobody had ever been informed about it. After all, the Applebys hadn't planned to die. Blinded by the prospect of riches, it never occurred to him that he had no idea how to crack a safe. He single-mindedly searched the room, oblivious of all else but his hunt for the safe. So he didn't feel the presence in the room with him, nor did he hear the footsteps behind him. And he didn't have a chance to scream as a hand clamped tightly over his mouth. Okay, folks, this has been chapters 4, 5, and 6 of Freddy Krueger's Tales of Terror, Deadly Disguise by David Bergantino. And man, poor Jack. He's got like everybody in this house out to get him one way or another, right? But has anybody else noticed something, a little theme that's happened in tonight's upload?
two different people talked about dreams that they had leading into this party. Dreams, anybody? And one of those people said their dream was like a maze, but now it's like they know it's this house was the same one from their dream even though they can't remember it. Yeah, I'm sensing some Freddy Krueger stuff at play that was happening going into where this story began, and I'm excited to see where it goes, and I'll be back very soon with more of this book. But like I said at the beginning of the upload, I want to let the author, David Bergantino, know, who's having some health problems at the moment, that we are thinking about him. And David, thank you for this great book series, all of your contributions to horror and to literature. It's greatly appreciated, and I and my listeners hope that you have a speedy recovery and that you're feeling tip-top very soon. Thank you very much, and guys, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying thanks for listening, and pleasant dreams!